Just on the video, it said that Abdulaziz ibn Saud married all of the daughters of the tribes. But wouldn't that mean he had more than four wives? Is that correct?
No. If you remember last session, we talked about Sayyidina Hassan, and he had many wives, right?
Yeah.
And later on, through a bit of prompting from you guys and digging, we got the number. Does anyone remember the number?
Right. Was that
In the
Was it not 60 something?
No, more than that.
90?
Yeah, in the region of 90.
At one time?
No. It's so basically the way it works is, and again, this is a good question. Let's begin here. The ethics of a leader is very different to the ethics of an average person. Right? We've mentioned this in 𝗼𝙗𝗚𝗏 when we talk of the Umayyads, some of their practices. The ethics of somebody in power, of a nation, of a dominion, is very different to the ethics of an individual, a civilian. How we marry, why we marry, is very different to why the aristocracy marry and how they marry, you see. So they had this kind of a joke amongst the Ikhwan, his army. They had a joke about Ibn Saud. They said that Ibn Saud had two swords. He had two swords. One sword was with metal. It's an iron sword with which he would cut the necks of the adversary. And the second sword is flesh, if you can get the gist of what I'm trying to say here, right? With which he fixed what he destroyed effectively. So this was a common practice, you know, where you had people who conquered regions, especially within the tribal regions of Arabia. One way to prevent that tribe from rebelling or coming back for revenge is to marry a daughter from that tribe, the chief's daughter or the leading clan, to marry their daughter, because you're now creating a link of kinship. And so therefore they become your allies, okay? So their interest becomes your interest, and likewise. And we've seen this in the seerah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he conquered some of the Jewish tribes, he married the daughters. That's how he got Safiya and other Jewish wives. It was a way of bringing the people together, okay? But also it's a strategic way of spreading his empire, because he was consolidating Arabia. And so by having a wife from each tribe, effectively he was buying them in, and there was no way for them to sever that link. For them also, it turns them from being a conquered people to being part of the conqueror, right? Because now they can say we have a stake in his conquests, we're part of his family, and therefore when he expands, we expand. So he married several wives, and keep this in mind, the official number is 45 offspring, but if you listen to the wording, it said 45 sons, right? The Arabs traditionally, I don't know about now, when they count people, they only count the men, right? And this is why, if you look at, for example, the first hijrah to Habasha, to Abyssinia, the numbers are low. And the reason why the numbers are low, they only counted the male Sahaba. They don't count the females or the children. They only count the men. So this, when you read in numbers in history, and you look at especially classical history, the Arabs, when they mention numbers and they're counting numbers, unless they tell you there are women and children in these numbers, it's only men. So those 45 offspring were just boys. Now imagine if you count the daughters as well on top of the boys. So he did that not because he was lustful. He's a human being, and when people have power, they also have an appetite that matches that power, which is why, according to some studies, I think 1 in 10 Asian men or women today on Earth are descendants of who? Which great conqueror?
Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan, yes. Genghis Khan. Right. I'm not sure he did it because of strategic reasons, but with the Arab kind of clans, that was a strategic way of bringing ties together. And actually, quite frankly, even within the European nations, in our last session, again, we talked about the 3 leaders of World War I within the Western European nations: Russia, Britain, and what was the third nation? Germany. And they were all what?
Cousins.
First cousins. They had the same grandmother. Yeah, because the blue bloods or the aristocracy, they have marriage is not about love. It's about alliances. Now, once you marry the person who you're supposed to marry, you may have an affair on the side to fulfill your actual desire. You have an affair, which is why Henry VIII, he wanted to have more than one wife, but he couldn't. He was restricted. In our modern history, you could look at, for example, King Charles and his wife. Who was his wife, King Charles? Who was he married to? Diana. Did he love Diana? Did he love Diana?
No.
Did she love him? No. It was something that was arranged. But who he truly loved was Camilla, right? So if they became Muslim, it's okay, marry 4. It's no problem. You don't have to get into these kind of side affairs.
A slight tangent on Genghis Khan. I think one thing that he did was he would marry his daughters to different allies, and then he would send his son-in-laws on the front line. And they would essentially they see that as an honor, and then they would be killed. And obviously, his daughters would actually inherit their kingdoms.
This is not new. This is not old, by the way. Let's have a little bit of a historical analysis of marriages, right? Just for the next 2 minutes. In traditional societies, and this is why it's not good for us when we live in Western societies or we live in modern societies to judge other nations or other societies and customs. We don't understand the reality. A young woman, the parents look for somebody older than her, much older, right? If she's, let's say, 17 or 18 or 19 or 20, traditionally, you look for somebody in their 40s to marry her after. Why? There are many reasons. Number one, he's ready. He should be ready by that point. He should have a home. He should have some kind of livelihood. He should be able to, somebody of standing in society. He can look after the daughter you're giving him, effectively. Secondly, the inheritance. The older the man is and the more he has to his name, the less the marriage effectively will be shorter. He doesn't have a long lifespan left, right? So there is that element as well. If a man is wealthy, well-to-do, people want their daughters to marry him because eventually they will inherit from him, right? So there are many things that people used to calculate before for marriages. Now things have changed. We can afford to look at people and say, oh, well, it's not a match made in heaven. Why did they marry her after him? But the things that they considered back then, Ibn Saud married for those reasons, but he also had concubines, and those were innumerable, and those concubines are for personal pleasure, effectively. Yeah. If you look at some of the biographies of Ibn Saud and some of the books that mention his personal life, he was very fond of blonde Eastern European concubines. So when he was around in his prime, concubines are coming. So some of his allies, when they went to certain regions, they would get him concubines and bring them to him because they knew he had a weakness for that. And it was not only him. If you look at the Ottomans, and they had a weakness for blonde concubines, especially European concubines, blonde concubines. And the general preference Muslim men had traditionally for these women over and above their wives. That was a reality. So we live in very different times. We can't judge other people for how they used to practice things. And his strategy worked because, look, we're going to find out today, his strategy worked. He succeeded in his mission successfully. In fact, supremely successfully in terms of when we look at the other people who also tried to do what he did, there's no comparison whatsoever. Any other questions? Anything else before we begin?
Welcome to History Yoon, the world's leading online learning platform specializing in Islamic history. To discover the History Yoon mobile app and participate in regular live and interactive seminars and tune in directly from your handset from anywhere in the world. Enjoy instant access to a growing catalog of on-demand streaming content exclusive to the platform, accessible from a variety of devices including desktops, tablets, and cell phones. Connect instantly with our global community of history enthusiasts via our private community forum. To find out more about our online history programs and resources, visit our website today at www.historyyoon.com.